Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're going to take a look at a whole lesson with Amber and Legolas that's going to focus on the work in the canter. Now, Legolas is a very big horse, and we haven't done a whole lot of cantering with him. When he came to us, he was already kind of bolting in the canter. His canter is very, very strong and very out of control. So we just kind of stayed away from the canter for most of his first year of training. Now, remember, he's going into the second year of training here, or in second year of training here with us at Art to Ride, and Amber had him for about a year before she brought him down here, just doing lots of long and low stretching work. But we've seen him develop really absolutely beautifully and seen him beginning to come up into collection. Now today we will ask for collection, but only a little bit at the very last thing that we do today. Just to see if he still has enough strength to be able to come all the way up. But we're going to focus mainly on the working gaits here to prepare him for the work in canter that we're going to do, which will be pretty extensive compared to the work that we've normally done with him. We're just now beginning to feel like we have enough control and he has enough balance to be able to really begin to work in canter earnestly. So she starts out here in the walk and the stretch, as we always do. Once again, I had someone ask me just recently, and someone had told them that a Grand Prix horse shouldn't stretch. And of course, we know how ridiculous that is. I mean, it's the idea of, if you're an athlete, do you stretch before you then warm up? You can't just start athletic performance at the height of the performance, physical effort that is, and expect to do that day after day after day. They just can't do it. So once again, remember, collection is a physical state of being where the horse has developed enough physically to be able to collect. It's not a trick. So therefore, if your horse has lost a lot of strength over its top line, it's not going to be able to develop the same level of collection that it would if it were in peak level of performance. So once again, collection is not a trick. It's the horse's ability to be strong enough, once again, through the top line. And the top line have developed correctly. That is, the withers will have already pulled up through the shoulders. The back is really flattened and come up, and the horse can really engage the top line. Then we can expect to begin to see real collection, which is, remember, the degree to which the horse lowers and maintains the lowering of the three joints of the hind legs, like a person squatting down to jump up. Same kind of situation that we're looking here for the horse to do. And what that does is, as you know, if you run with your legs bent, you'll see how easy that is on your joints. Run with your legs straight and you won't be able to walk the next day. Well, that same is true of the horse. When we ride them hollow and do hard and difficult things with them, it puts a great deal of wear and tear on them. So once again, no matter whatever level the horse is, we begin and we end at the same place in a nice long stretch, letting the horse stretch out and relax, getting the blood flow through the muscles as we see here. So she starts off in the walk, just running very quickly through these exercises. Once again, you'll see how quickly we go through all this. We don't spend any time just harping on any one exercise. As I say, it would be very rare on any given day that I would perform any given exercise more than 2 or 3 times in a row before I gave the horse a break or before even I being done with that exercise for the day. So here she goes into shoulder in, once again, still in the stretch. We're not asking him to come up yet into the working frame. We're just, once again, still warming him up here. So he gets a good stretch down in that, and that's really beautiful, and we see how that is able to keep that same rhythm. When you look at your shoulder ins, if you tape yourself or watch other people, if you see that the shoulder in slows the horse down to the point that it's barely moving, then once again, that's an exercise that has no value whatsoever. Remember, it's the rhythm that guides everything that we do, and whether or not the horse is over its back or not and relaxed. So those things have to be there. So that's all we're looking for here, is for him to just stretch out and begin to really swing those back legs and step through, as you see him beginning to do here, nice and actively now as he's swinging through. So this is all part of a logical warm-up for any horse. Once again, we just can't expect horses to just come out and perform at their highest levels, without taking them through some kind of warm-up. And once again, that is at the very core of dressage. The whole idea of dressage from the very beginning was a more enlightened way of training horses, where we can get beyond force and get the horses to actually like what we do and become willing participants and partners in this sport, which is a lot safer way to ride them than if they're constantly trying to work against you. So once again, we see a good leg yield here. You see her really stepping through deeply. Once again, the neck stretching down and long. And once again, you can just imagine how that facilitates that stretch over the back as the horse stretches so deep and steps so deep under the body. Every time it does that, it pushes up through the back, and the back comes up a little bit more. Now, once again, you can see with this horse that he is in a double bridle today. We're doing that because, once again, when we got this horse, he had already learned how to bolt in the canter. and became very strong and fractious in the canter. So we still have, and one other habit that he had developed is every time he tried to canter him, he'd throw his head straight in the air. So he came to us with those difficulties. And once again, as I always say, it's easier to train a horse than it is to retrain them. So we have to undo some thought patterns in the horse's mind, so to speak, here. So we just have the double bridle on, just so in case he gets a little strong, she's able to have something that she can finesse him with without having to take a great hold on the snaffle bridle. So, but you'll notice throughout this work that she's always working on the snaffle rein. Now, the snaffle rein is always looser than the curb rein is, except for maybe there's one or two more moments when she might use that curb rein a little bit. Most of the time, you're going to see there's a good slack in that rein, and that's exactly how we want that to happen. So once again, see how she comes into this nice stretching. Well, how she was able to keep the rhythm as she went right into that stretching shoulder in, and how deeply he's stepping through behind. And once again, every time that hind leg steps deep under the body, it's a moment that we actually get sort of collection in under the microscope, so to speak. The horse actually compresses those joints of the hind legs, which is actually the beginning. A correct shoulder in is the beginning of asking a horse to be able to collect. It's where we develop that strength from. But once again, that only happens if the horse is doing the shoulder in and working over its back. If the horse isn't working over its back and shoulder in, you're probably just damaging the horse's joints. That's the thing you have to always realize. That, that's why in the beginnings, the old masters used to talk about going forward and straight. Of course, what they meant by that was to engage forward under the body, the back up, and go straight ahead. And kind of straight ahead until the back does come up and the horse begins to come through, because that's when we see the horses just become easy to bend. Once again, if you're having to struggle to bend your horse, it's because he's hollow. A hollow horse is always difficult to bend because it literally cannot bend because the vertebrae in the back are fused. So now she's begun to bring him up a little bit in the working walk, and she encounters a little bit of difficulty there, a little resistance, but he comes right back into it. It's just a matter of him coming from that longer frame and taking a little bigger effort to come up into the shoulder in now in the working frame. But you notice that didn't take any great deal of effort, nor did he resist for very long. Now, another thing I want you all to do is you watch these videos. Now, remember that Amber is also learning all of this stuff for the first time herself. So she's learning as she's teaching her horse. Once again, what I want to show you all is that really, if you can walk, trot, and a canter reasonably well and have control over your body and your autonomic reflexes, you can train a horse, because it doesn't take Herculean feats of strength to train a horse. It takes a smart mind to train a horse correctly. Otherwise, all we're doing is trying to physically force them into something. But I want you to see how Amber's position is improving. If you go back and watch some of these earlier videos that we did of her a year ago, you'll see that she was nowhere near it. She actually looks like a much taller person now in the saddle than she did then, and her legs look longer, because everyone has to go through that period of time when their legs stretch down, when you get the tension out of your legs and you really let them go from the hips. And I always find that always takes at least a year or two for that to begin to happen, and one to get really that kind of soft contact that we want with the side of the horse. So we can see how really nicely he's starting to come up here into the walk, and you see how the hocks are beginning to flex more. He didn't just slow down and shorten his stride. The stride lifted. And remember, that's what we're looking for. The difference between real collection and just bad riding is the horses just shorten their gaits, and that's not at all what collection is. So many people think that collection is just kind of whipping a horse up and getting them to kind of jig in place, so to speak. They think that's piaffe and passage, but nothing could be further from the truth. To start with, if the horse is not relaxed, all those exercises would have nothing but detrimental effects on the horse, in the long run. But we can see this one, now Amber has been working this horse as a perfect example, It sort of takes a while in the beginning. Once again, there's always that like 1 or 2 year period when we start with horses, when it takes them a while for them to where all we're really doing is just building the engine, so to speak. And that's all we can do day after day after day until the horse begins to come through. That is, the horse begins to lift its back and you begin to feel the impulsion move through the body of the horse. And then we could begin to ask the horse for many, many more complicated things and more difficult exercises. But we have to wait for that to happen. And that's the hardest thing for people to do, is just to realize that if you just keep doing the right things and getting the horse over the back, it will develop absolutely beautifully without there having to be any fight or fuss. Now, that's not to say that, you may have a strong moment with a horse, but, you shouldn't have many if everything has been done correctly, as you see with this horse, how he's coming beautifully up into this. And now, what we're going to see with this horse in the next year or so, he'll be, this horse a year from now will be going 4th level Prix St. George. whereas many of the horses that were his contemporaries, people who said, "Oh, you're just taking so long stretching this horse," they're probably horses, many of that I know for a fact, that our horses are already lame because the people, they just, that seems to be the thing these days. They last about a year or two and they're falling apart. Well, that should just be the beginnings. You work a horse like this. I mean, this horse is not, knock on wood, of course, I'll say that, had any soundness issues since the day that we started him, because we're very, very careful about what we do not to overwork them. And that being the biggest thing that I see with people. So many people today are overworking their horses. I mean, if you're working your horse, an hour and more every day until it's in a lather, or upside down, one or the other, you're really just wearing the horse out. So remember that, our concept is the back and the rhythm guide everything that we do. If I can't get a horse's back up in the walk, I'm never going to come out of the walk. It's as simple as that. There's no point in trotting a horse around. That's what the groundwork is for. If we do that work correctly, then we strengthen the horse so that when we get on it, if I feel there's something there supporting me, then good. If it can support me in the walk, good. Then I'll try the trot. But if it can't support me in the trot, I'm just going to come back to working in the walk. So once again, you can see how she's begun to bring him up here, how different this is than the walk. He's just beginning to do this kind of walk where he really comes up, and how beautiful this half pass is that we see here. That's starting to come very nicely. He fusses a little bit with his head, a little bit of confusion. This is all, this is the most difficult work that he does, today, is the half passes. He's a very big horse, and he's a little bit narrow in the chest, this horse. Makes some of this stuff a little bit difficult for him, but, not so much that it's ever going to interfere with his ability to succeed. But you can see how even here, as we begin to bring him up into the working walk, how much she must have to work there to keep those hind legs going in the same tempo. Because what happens was they tend to come up and then they'll shorten. So if they do, then we know we have to lengthen them right back out. But look how nicely he comes up into that working walk and now flexes at the pole. If you remember this horse from his earlier videos, you see that he was quite broken over in the neck. And so once again, we had to wait a year just for that to be healed. But now he comes up, and you notice he was able to keep that same rhythm and come up and become very sort of four square, as I like to say. Kind of makes the horse kind of four-wheel drive. They really get four square underneath you when they lift their back. And how steadily he's continuing to step in the walk like that. So that's exactly what we're looking for. So once again, this is exactly the same walk and the same work I would take any horse through on any given day. Now, once again, as I said, our goal is whether the horse is over its back or not. So if I get to the walk and I can't keep the horse's back up, that would be where I would stop my day. Wherever I can't, I'm going to bring every horse up as far as I can every day to the highest level frame it can do every day. But as soon as I feel it can't maintain it anymore, I'm going to let it stretch right back down again, so it doesn't begin to resist and resent what I ask it to do. So you can see how now she's come up into a really beautiful working walk there, how nice he's beginning to maintain bend. And once again, you've seen me very few times talk about having to work a horse through bend. Once again, the horse's back starts coming up, they're able to bend, and they're able to bend beautifully. You see how he was able to. Now, this is only the third or fourth time he's done these counter changes of hand, but how beautifully he was able to do that. Change the bend. And yes, he has a few little awkward moments there for a second, trying to come out of it, but she keeps him right there. He stays focused, his ears stay back and soft on her. And of course, we come right back to that stretch as soon as he's done that, and let him stretch all the way back out. So once again, remembering, the stretch we want to come back to. The stretch is where the muscling is built, because if we don't come back to the stretch, the muscle stays tight throughout the workout. If the muscle stays tight throughout the workout, there's no blood flowing through the muscle. So you don't get the benefits of the nutrients in the blood coming to the muscle and helping the horse build tissue. And that's what we're trying to do. So once again, that's one of the most important aspects. Just like if you work out, even doing massage and things like that, anything that increases the circulation, right? You know that if you're injured, you need to draw circulation to the area, right? Well, that's what actually building muscle is to some degree, in the sense that we have these little tears in the muscles, and the muscles begin to build, and they fill in those fibers. So once again, that won't happen if the blood isn't flowing. If we keep a horse tense, once again, there won't be much blood flowing through its muscles. But that was really good. He was able to go right back down into that stretch, and look how beautiful he's come back into a nice active walk again. Once again, still the working walk. And yes, he has his little moments there where she's trying to bring him up a little bit and trying to get him just to maintain a little more impulsion in the walk. Remember, impulsion is the energy that we have at our disposal, but it's not nervous energy as some people think it is. Real impulsion is more an expression of the horse's of the joy of living, so to speak. Because the horse loves that feeling. Once they really start getting through their backs, as you can see, this horse, he starts right out in that working trot. And once again, if you go back and compare, the video today with what you would have seen from him earlier on, you'll see how much more engaged he is and how much more lifting off the ground he is. So, of course, when we come to the trot, even though he starts off in a pretty good working trot there, we're going to let him stretch out here a little bit, as we always do, just to be sure everything is flowing very nicely, and as we will come back to the stretch throughout the workout. So this is all really, really good. Now notice how little change there is, but look at how, as soon as he stretches down, you'll see how watch the back end. So once again, everyone, you want to educate your eyes to watch the back end of the horse, not watch the front end of the neck, which is just a symptom of what's happening behind. And unfortunately, as I said, so many people have learned to use draw reins and these kind of things to make horses look like they're something that they are not. Once again, a correctly trained horse would never have to be pulled in the neck, and nor would you ever want to pull it in the neck, because that just breaks them over and puts them on the forehand. So she does a little stretch there, and then she's going to come bring them back up and find that working trot again. Right there, you see how he starts to have, after that stretch, his trot has a little more bounce. It has a little more thrust in it. That is, he's pushing off the ground just a little bit more behind. But still just in a working trot rising there. Look how nicely flexed and correct he is at the pole. And once again, this horse was difficult because he was broken at the third vertebrae. We had to let that heal up, but now we're able to get this. And look how beautifully he comes through in those lengthenings. Just a nice little lengthening of stride there, and how beautifully fluent that was. He had a little skip there, but that's the ring. The ring's a little dry today. And this is a very powerful horse. That's why it's very important to have your good footing, and have a horse as powerful as this pushing off the ground. You need to have a good purchase for them. So she comes back to the stretch on this side. As always, whenever we do something on one side, we come back and do the same thing on the other side. Once again, remembering that no horse can ever be round or bent laterally until it bends longitudinally, till the back comes up underneath her. So she's just letting him here just stretch out a little bit. He's a little bit fractious at first. He's a fresh horse, just came out of the barn, so he's feeling pretty good. It takes him a few minutes to settle in, but as you see, it doesn't take very long, relatively speaking. And what you'll notice there is no fight here in this horse or in the rider. If you're fighting, there's something seriously wrong with what you're doing. Once again, the immortal words of Bill Steinkraus, my favorite, which was simply, if you can't get the horse to like it, it's never going to be very good, and that's true of dressage or jumping. But once again, take a look at how nicely Amber is starting to stretch up, how much taller she's looking in the saddle, and how much bigger his wave is. You can just literally see him now pushing her up and carrying her forward. She doesn't look like she's sitting in a hole, as so many riders do today, and just kind of being pulled along forward. You can see how he's developed so much more thrust. Now remember, we're only working in a working trot now. We're not trying to collect him yet. We're just getting a good stabilized working trot, because remember, the focus on this lesson today is going to be on the canter work. So we're just going to quickly take him through some stuff here in the trot, just to be sure he's nice and supple and everything's moving correctly before we go into the canter work. So this is all very good, shows an excellent working trot. Once again, he's not lowering much behind, but he is showing quite a bit of thrust off the ground. His forehand is beginning to lift up a little bit. So while not in collection yet, this is starting to look like a really good working trot, and how beautifully connected over his top line. Now, once again, I want to focus where you see there how Amber's legs are moving a little bit. And one thing I have to say, is people often comment about that. Amber's legs are very loose. The problem is when you ride, she's not very tall, and this is a very, very big horse. He's probably very near or over 18 hands. So her legs don't hang very far down his side. So unfortunately, when he has so much thrust, it kind of pops her legs out of the saddle a little bit, but that's okay. She's able to deal with that quite nice, and the whole thing is that she's not tense in her leg. I'd rather have a leg that's moving and just hanging down around the horse, if it's moving with the horse a little bit. As long as it's not tense and gripping, the horse is not going to have a problem with it. So you can see here, he just got a little bit too short in it, and that caused him to want to toss his head a little bit, because he wasn't quite as comfortable as he should be. So we're just going to get him moving out ahead of her leg again. I'm just going to come into some leg yields. But once again, so we didn't go back and do that 5 more times, because he just had a little bit of a head toss there, and that he got a little bit uncomfortable. Perhaps she asked him to be a little bit, to come up a little more than he was ready to do at this juncture. But because that was pretty good, then we're going to come back to the stretch once again. When you have a difficulty with your horse, if instead of trying to just beat it out of the horse, if you'll come back to the stretch and understand that, most horses are quite willing. And if we do things, in the right order that they should come, we'll find that they're quite willing to do the things that we ask. And when we ask them to do the things, if we know they're physically prepared to do them, what we'll usually find is that they're quite happy to do that work when we have physically prepared them for it. Because once again, they begin to think of this as a big game to come out and play. It feels good. You can see this horse now. You can see how his stride beginning to open up there. He was just being a little behind her leg there to start off with today, and not giving her quite the stretch that she wanted. He wasn't quite moving off her leg quite as well as she wanted him to do. So she just came back to the stretch, got him going a little deeper, and then she'll bring him back up and sit to the trot and try again, as opposed to what we see so many people would do today, was start rolkering the horse or whipping the horse excessively. But how beautifully he's come back. Now notice that the trot now has a little more thrust in it than it had a moment ago, and even develops a little more thrust in the shoulder in. Notice how once again the shoulder in did not change the tempo of the horse. She had a little difficulty there. She had to put her leg on a little bit because he kind of stalled a little moment, but she was able to put him right back in it, and that was really good. Just exactly what we're looking for there. But you can see how he's starting to have that beautiful cadence where it's just starting to lift up. You can just see how right there, he's beginning to have that cadence where he's actually pushing the whole body of the horse up off the ground. Not full-blown collection yet, but a very good working trot. So again, very steady in the bridle, very correct flexion at the jaw and pole, very uphill. Never behind the bridle, and once again, how beautifully he goes into that and how easy it is to bend. Once again, when the horses are prepared and you have got the backup, it is easy to bend them. You never have to worry about horses bending laterally at all. As soon as you get them to lift over their backs, they will bend. It's very simple. It takes so much struggle out of this sport. Once you realize that, this is what's standing in most people's way, that is that their horses are not over their backs. They try to ask them to do these extreme things. It's on a kind of sad for the horses, because we now breed these phenomenal horses that have so much movement, and yet they're all ruined at such an early age because either in jumping or dressage, the people just keep, they jump them because they have so much natural talent. They don't do any gymnastic training or gymnastic jumping with them. They just start jumping them over fences. Because they can count on these warm bloods today jump a 4-foot course the way a thoroughbred would have jumped over 1 foot. So once again, look how nicely it comes there. Now he just has a little skip once again there, makes a little mistake. We don't make a big deal of it. She just softens and put him right back into the stretch, and it came through quite nicely after that. So there would be no need to repeat that 5 more times. That was really good right there. So we're ready to move on. Notice that each time he comes back up, how we have a little more bounce, like right there. It starts to begin to develop a little more collection, but how beautifully solid and steady it is. And once again, you can see the ball lifting her. Now she's on the weight of the rein there, on the snaffle. Once again, if you look closely there, you'll see that the curb rein is very, very loose. There's no tension on the curb rein at all, and that's exactly how it should be used. When you see these upper level horses and you see that the curb rein is pulled straight back all of the time, that tells you the horse has probably been roll curved, and it's basically just forced against the hand. That's not a horse that's light, and it's not a horse that should score high, but yet we see at dressage shows horses who are held so tight against the hand that their chins are pinned to their chest, and somehow they're given 80%. So we must all begin to talk about these things and reclaim this sport for the horses, if nothing else. So once again, a nice medium trot there, and then you can see once again that's a little issue with the ring there, is that it's getting a little dry, and he starts to push off those big powerful hind legs of there, and he loses a little bit. But he was starting to get a little tightened up there, so we're going to come back and just stretch him again. Same thing. So instead of getting on him and trying to get after him and whip up a bigger extension out of him, we're going to come back and stretch and let him relax and get his muscles in the right place again, and then we'll come back and try again. Because once again, remember, it's all about the horse being prepared to do the job that you want to do. If he's prepared to do the job you want to do, he'll probably do it quite easily if you have put all of your ducks in a row, so to speak, in how you've gone about asking or developing, so to speak. Once again, as we say, there's no point in getting on a horse and riding it if it can't get over its back. Now see how beautifully he came up there, and now we're seeing just a little bit more lift in front. He's starting to show actually something a little bit more like collection. Not quite all the way there yet. But once again, he shows a nice medium trot that time. That came through. A little bit of resistance there, but nothing terrible. And you can see he gets a little tired and he starts struggling with those big back legs of his. Once again, this is a very big horse. So she gets him stabilized again. Still just in the working trot. Very nice. We can see him just lifting a little bit there in front. How good that's starting to look. You can see he's got a little more cadence. Once again, we're not asking for everything he can do. I'm just looking for a good working trot as we prepare for the canter work, which is what this lesson is all about. So everything there was just kind of do what he can do up to the level that he can do it in the walk and trot work, and then go right into working in the canter. So once again, she goes right into the canter, into the shoulder in the canter. Once again, because this horse had a tendency to kind of bolt off every time you started him, just put him right into the shoulder in a little bit. That gets him the idea of just lifting up. And once again, you can see how big this horse is, but how nicely uphill his canter is starting to be. When we first started, this horse's canter was so gigantic. I mean, you just literally could, 3 or 4 strides and he'd be down the long side. So once again, this is starting to come up. He's starting to carry himself in the canter. And there isn't much point in cantering until they get to that point where they can do that. Remember, getting up into this kind of level is part of the horse's level of physical conditioning. See how she was able to make that nice transition right back to the working trot, no change. And once again, this is something that we're only just starting to do with this horse. Now we're starting to work him, in longer and longer periods. Now, this is more like the one that we're looking for. He had a little bobble there, but the last half of that medium trot was really quite nice and actually came even a little more uphill. So that was really good. And you can see even here, as he kind of flicks his tail there a little bit, sometimes he gets a little shorter than he's happy with. And she lets him back out again. Now, that was pretty good there. And you can see that tendency of his to want to lift his head. That used to be a full-blown, he'd throw his head straight up in the air and take off with it. So that's really pretty good. This is all coming around. I'm not going to try to make that perfect in a day and school it over and over again. It's just gradually going away. And that's the way most things are. When you have horses that are a little difficult and they're fractious in the cross ties and this kind of stuff, the correct work, the more they get in the zone, in our work, the more you'll see all of those problems that you have around the stable will just start to disappear as well as the horse just gets more relaxed in its own mind. So that was a good circle there. We were happy with that. Had a little bit of discomfort making that downward transition, but not too bad. Was able to come right back into the frame again. So we're happy with that. And you notice that we only do little short periods of the canter at any one given time, and then we come back to the trot again. So if we were trying to keep him in a canter for 15 minutes or something, it would just be impossible for him. He just doesn't have that level of strength yet. So we come back and then just work those line things a little bit, which are always a little better. Now look at that one. Now that's the best one he's done so far today. See how beautifully that came through behind. So that was a good medium trot for this horse that time. Absolutely no break in the stride whatsoever. So that was exactly what I was looking for. Very nice indeed, staying up quite nicely. And once again, notice how his lift gets better and better. Once again, he lifts his head just a little bit, but he comes right into, instead of bolting off, he comes into a pretty nice balanced canter for him. Makes a little mistake, and that's okay. We just let him come back again. Don't make a big deal of it, and we just start him again. So once again, as we would say, don't beat, repeat. Just ask again when the horse makes a mistake. We don't have to make a big deal out of it. Just like with a child, if you start slapping their fingers every time they make a mistake on the piano, they're not going to want to play the piano, are they? As that old kind of school mentality used to be. Well, the same is true of the horse. I mean, if you really get after him and punish him severely for every little mistake he makes, pretty soon he's going to be a neurotic mess, which is why so many dressage horses are. So that was really good. He's staying uphill quite nicely there. And we're going to go into the half pass. We've only done this once or twice before. So that was really quite good. Happy with that. I think we've maybe done that once time before, so that was really quite good for his first attempts at the half pass at the canter. Showed quite a bit of ability to stay balanced over his back, so we're very happy with that. Pretty good downward transition. Now, you notice how big he is, and he kind of he falls into it for a moment there, but he recovers quite nicely. And once again, another really good medium trot. You see him really swing through. Notice again, remember that the extended or medium trots are not correct unless the back leg comes through to the same degree as the front leg. That's how so many horses' legs get damaged, because if they're not coming through behind when you ask for those big trots, it pulls all of the muscles in those tendons. Now that was really quite a nice transition there. Notice he didn't throw his head that time, so that's what I'm looking for. That's a big improvement. And look how it slowed down. He's holding himself up a little bit more. The canter's starting to get much more uphill, and that's exactly what I'm looking for him to have happen. Now this day particularly will be just about the most we've ever cantered him at one time, so this is really quite good for him. Just into 15-meter circles there. Nothing too small, keeping it within the scope of what he's capable of doing, but pretty well balanced throughout that. And what you'll also notice is that just like everything else, he's starting to get much straighter in the canter. Once again, look how nice and complete the flexion is, how nice he keeps the pole up. And he goes right into that half pass. And once again, this is only, I think, the second time we've done this with him, and that was really quite nice. I couldn't be more pleased. He straightened out nicely when she put her inside leg on, when she got to that point on the center line. So that was really good. And even for him to be able to make these corners like this, for him, now watch how nicely he opens up. Now see how he gallops over his back? That's what we're looking for. It looks like a ball coming down there, and you can see the hind end come through. That's what you're looking for in a racehorse as well. It's all the same thing. There's no difference. Horse is a horse, of course, of course. And once again, now we ask for a little bit bigger trot, that being the biggest one of the day. Pretty good extended trot there that time. Just a little bit of a bobbler, not quite as pure as the last one, but quite nice and good enough. So we're going to come back to the stretch there once again. That was a lot of work for him. And once again, you see how willing this horse is to work. That's how your horses will work too when you stop asking them to do things they can't do. You know, once again, that's the whole idea of dressage. The idea of dressage is gymnastic, progressive gymnastic training that develops the horse's physical and mental attitudes over time, just like it would be for a child. You know, imagine if your child went to gymnastics and you know, was nervous about going, you know, or hated the work. They wouldn't get very far. Well, horses are the same way as well. Yes, we can make horses do a lot of things by forcing them. But, you know, should we? And the answer of that, of course, is no. It certainly is not good for the horse, and I don't think it's really good for people either. Because remember what horses should do for you. And the reason that militaries used to, and still European militaries still keep horses as part of their officer training. You know, if you can't train a horse, you can't control yourself on the back of a horse, how could you control a bunch of men? Now see how we come back to a stretch here and just stretching, how beautifully he's swinging over his back in that. So that being the idea. So we must get back to the idea of what horses can really do for us in terms of character development and learning to control ourselves. You know, when I go to horse shows these days and I see these 15-year-old girls and they've got a $150,000 horse and they're crying because they didn't win the blue ribbon, they only got second. You know, there's something seriously wrong with this picture. And just that whole idea, I see so many trainers today teaching riders that, you know, that it's the horse's fault. It's always the horse's bad, you know. Whereas I hope you will all come to realize that, you know, there are no bad horses. There's just horses that have been treated badly. But I've yet to see a horse that truly had a bad character yet, that, you know, when trained correctly, didn't come back around. So now here we begin to ask for just a little bit more there. He's got a nice big floaty trot stretching up underneath the back. He's starting to carry her very nicely. So that's exactly what we're looking for. And how easily he comes back to that. You know, so to the people who say that the horses will never come off their forehand if you stretch them, look at this one. Once again, just a little movement in the head, but you notice I don't worry about that. So we don't make a big deal of that. That's just slowly going away. And, you know, in another couple of months' time, as we really focus on the canter now, you'll see that completely disappear as he's gotten so soft in the bridle. So once again, a nice balanced canter, still uphill, so still very quite good. How he comes around this circle, how he keeps the forehand slightly lifted. Exactly what we're looking for. Now we're going to work on the counter canter, which is the hardest thing for him because we have started flying changes a few times, but that was really quite good. He had a little bit of a skip there, but really that was beautiful. That for him, for a full loop serpentine, that was really quite good. Lost it in the corner there a little bit, but he just recovered there, and that's exactly what we want to see. So that was really good. And this is going to come back to another nice medium trot there across the diagonal just to take advantage of all that energy trying to flow through the body of the horse. Look how beautifully an uphill is. Look how happy this horse's expression is. Ears are never pinned back. He's never swishing his tail. If you saw him in person, he's not grinding his teeth, as we see so many do. You know, listen to your horses, folks. They're trying to tell you things when they're grinding their teeth and pinning their ears back at you. But unfortunately, too many riders today don't listen. They just think it's the horse being bad. A nice canter transition there. Once again, not too much tossing of the head, so that was okay. That was an improvement over what we saw before. And notice that she doesn't work to try to just hold his head down. What's more important is that he stay uphill. That's what's important, and that's what he's doing. Now you notice he had a little difficulty there, so he did the flying change with her. She's just going to come back, give him a little rest for a moment, and come back and start that again, rather than just beating him up over it. She's just going to come back and start again. So once again, don't beat, repeat. And you can see how difficult that is for him, but he makes it that time, so that's fantastic. Exactly what we're looking for. He held it. So once again, you see that she didn't have to go back and discipline him by whipping him all up. She just came back and let him stretch a little bit and started again. Once again, look how nice and forward that lengthening the stride is. He comes forward underneath her body. It's such a big horse. It still has a little difficulty making those downwards transitions, but really quite good. She's just stopping to relieve herself there for a moment. And once again, this is another thing, when you feel horses just really want to go, you want to let them go. We never want to get, beat horses up for wanting to go to the bathroom, because as soon as they do, you'll feel that they feel so much better. And it's, part of relaxation. We actually have seen horses that, were afraid to go in the ring because they've been beaten up so much every time they try to go. And those horses become very difficult and stuck feeling. But once again, now we're just going to ask for the last little bit. Will be the most collected that we do here. Notice he's come up a little more. There's a little more cadence here. So that's all we're asking for is the last few steps, just to give us a little bit more collection, so he elevates that forehand a little bit. It's not going to be as big as we've done on other days because he's already pretty tired. But he came back up into that pretty nicely. Look at the cadence as he lifts up, starting to develop much more thrust. Once again, how easily he bends through the corners now. Very nice. And how beautiful that trot is. Once again, the medium trot as he comes through. Look how deep the hind leg is coming through, swinging through on the same plane as the hind leg. That's exactly what we want to see happen. So she's going to bring him back up here again, and once again work for a few steps of a little more collected trot, like right here as we see it start to develop a little more cadence right there. Do you see it starts to come off the ground a little bit? We're not going to ask him to hold it for very long, just a few moments, because he's already worked very, very hard. But once again, look how correct that flexion is, the jaw and pull, and how uphill the horse stays. Still trying quite hard. That's very nice for him. And you can see he's starting to get a little tired behind now. So now we can see that at the back end starting to get a little tired, so we know that's about time to end this lesson. He got through all the canter work really quite well. We've been having difficulty with him with the counter canter, so with with just one little difficulty there, that was really quite good. It's one more good medium trot out of him. So again, watch how the hind legs come through. Once again, look how light the reins are, that she's not holding him up. He's literally on the weight of the rein in that position. So we ask for just a little bit more collection here right there, so we get a couple of steps of him staying up underneath her a little bit more, get a little more bounce off the ground. And we can also see from this lesson how much longer he's able to hold it. So after we got those few good steps, once again, towards collection, then we're going to come right back and let him stretch all the way back out again. We didn't expect him to hold that very long. Even a very advanced horse can only maintain collection for a certain period of time. In fact, all the work at the Spanish riding school, basically in their research into training and how to train them, they basically came to the conclusion that, training horses, in this kind of dressage for war horses was kind of impractical. And for that very reason, they're going to get worn out. And once again, just like in 3D eventing, how they've had to bring down the roads and tracks and things because the kind of horses people ride today just can't sustain the kind of endurance that thoroughbreds could. But we're all happy to see the thoroughbred organization, people getting back into riding thoroughbreds. I think that's a great thing. Anybody looking for a rescue horse, I highly recommend, if you are with people who are prepared to deal with them and understand how thoroughbreds work, then I highly recommend you. There's some just wonderful horses, some of the best horses I ever had. Once again, that's beautiful, nice and regular that time. That's exactly what we're looking for. So even throughout all this work we've done, he was still able to come back and give us one good medium trot at the end. So we're going to feel like that's about where we want to be for the day. He really gave us a good effort today, and that's exactly what we want to have happen. Once again, you see how he keeps stepping up off the ground there, starting to thrust just a little bit more, a little more push up. Remember, real collection, the horse elevates the entire body of the entire forehand, not just brings its knees up. When they just bring their knees up, that's a saddlebred. That's not a dressage horse. Beautifully steady in the bridle. She's let him flatten out now, just back to a working trot. And another beautiful workout for this horse that we focused on, the canter. And once again, things to take home is how we kept coming back. When the horse had a difficulty, how we came back to the stretch, and no matter what it was, rather than trying to do it over and over again. And he straightens himself quite nicely in a halt. Great job. This is Will Faerber with my associate trainer, Amber Matusik, and Legolas.